All right, we're gonna get right into it because JD Vance has gone to a security conference in Europe and did not talk about security shit. So I'm very excited to hear what the America First agenda is going to be like.
Delegates and luminaries and media professionals, and thanks especially to the hosts of the Munich Security Conference for being able to put on such an incredible event. We're, of course, thrilled to be here. We're happy to be here. And, you know, one of the things that I wanted to talk about today is, of course, our shared values. And, you know, it's great to be back in Germany. As you heard earlier, I was here last year as United States Senator.
I'm sure he really likes being in Germany.
I saw Foreign Secretary David Lammy, and joked that both of us last year had different jobs than we have now. But now it's time for all of our countries, for all of us who have been fortunate enough to be given political power by our respective peoples, to use it wisely to improve their lives. And I want to say that, you know, I was fortunate in my time here to spend some time outside the walls of this conference over the last 24 hours. And I've been so impressed by the hospitality of the people, even as, of course, as they're reeling from yesterday's horrendous attack. And the first...
I have no idea what he's talking about. I don't follow European news, so what happened in Munich? Child died from Munich car attack. Mother and child died from injuries after Munich car attack 3 days ago. A mother and her 2-year-old daughter have died from injuries sustained in Thursday's car attack in German city of Munich. Police say at least 37 people were injured when a car driven into a crowd of people at a trade union rally. So somebody attacked a trade union rally. The driver was a 24-year-old Afghan asylum seeker, police said, identified in local media as Farhad. So this is a security meeting, and yeah, this is tragic and sucks, but I feel like there's an agenda going to be tied to why you're bringing this up specifically, because there's a bunch of crimes that happen everywhere all the time. December 6th, people were killed after a man drove a car into a German Christmas market. An outspoken critic of Islam. Okay.
First time I was ever in Munich was with my wife, actually, who's here with me today, on a personal trip. And I've always loved the city of Munich, and I've always loved its people. And I just want to say that we're very moved, and our thoughts and prayers are with Munich and everybody affected by the evil inflicted on this beautiful community. We're thinking about you, we're praying for you, and we will certainly be rooting for you in the days and weeks to come. Now, I hope that's not the last bit of applause that I get, but we gather at this conference, of course, to discuss security, and normally we mean...
Let's go. Security. All right, you're in a room full of generals.
Threats to our external security. I see many great military leaders gathered here today. But while the Trump administration is very concerned with European security and believes that we can come to a reasonable settlement between Russia and Ukraine, and we also believe that it's important in the coming years for Europe to step up in a big way.
Famously, Trump is having a meeting with the Russians in Saudi Arabia that does not include any delegation from Ukraine right now. So those peace talks are just between Trump and Russia. No, Ukraine is not involved.
To provide for its own defense. The threat that I worry the most about vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, it's not China, it's not any other external actor. And what I worry about is the threat from within. The retreat...
The enemy within. Right, because Russia is not a threat to Europeans right now at the European Security Council meeting. Right.
Of Europe from some of its most fundamental values, values shared with the United States of America.
Oh.
Now, I was struck that a former European commissioner went on television recently and sounded delighted that the Romanian government had just annulled an entire election. He warned that if things don't go to plan...
I mean, everything he's saying is going to be, like, laced with right-wing bullshit, but let's go ahead and see what the Romanian government annulled election was. AP, tens of thousands protest in Romania's capital against annulled presidential race. Bucharest, Romania, tens of thousands protested in Romania's capital on Sunday against a top court decision last month to annul presidential election after an outsider candidate unexpectedly emerged as the frontrunner. Many of the demonstrators in Bucharest honked horns and waved Romanian blue, yellow, and red flags, while they brandished placards bearing slogans such as "Democracy is not optional" and "We want free elections." Many also demanded the resumption of the presidential race from the second round. The protest comes months after the Constitutional Court made the unprecedented move to annul the election just 2 days before December 8th runoff. The far-right populist Kalin Georgescu shocked many when he won the first round on November 24th, after which allegations of electoral violations and Russian interference emerged. So, probably the same thing that happened in Russia before they had their the same thing that happened with Ukraine when Russia influenced their elections with that Nikolai guy. I can't remember what his name was, but he got overthrown and there was protest against him. So, yeah, I believe it. Like, that's a thing that Russia does, is influence elections, especially in Eastern Europe. The cancelled presidential race last month plunged the European Union and NATO members country into turmoil and followed other controversies, including a recount of first-round votes. New dates have been set to rerun the vote. And I mean, like, they're just going to redo the votes, so, I mean, it's not that big of a deal. Georgescu's since challenged the court decision at local appeals court and lodged a complaint in the European Court of Human Rights. The Constitutional Court published decision to annul the election cited the illegal use of digital technologies, including artificial intelligence, as well as the use of undeclared sources of funding. Yeah, so he probably got funded by Russia. Yeah, I can see why people would be a little upset about that, given that Russia is currently invading a European country. Might not be the best idea to have that as a person that's influencing your campaign, or people that are influencing your campaign is the Kremlin.
Plan, the very same thing could happen in Germany too. Now, these cavalier statements are shocking to American ears. For years, we've been told that everything we fund and support is in the name of our shared democratic values. Everything from our Ukraine policy to digital censorship is billed as a defense of democracy. But when we see European courts canceling elections and senior officials threatening to cancel others, we ought to ask whether we're holding ourselves to an appropriately high standard. And I say ourselves because I fundamentally believe that we are on the same team. We must do...
Well, there was outside influence from Russia, apparently, and given that it's Romania, I tend to believe it. I tend to believe that there was actual outside influence from Russia, because, again, they are currently invading Ukraine, so...
More than talk about democratic values, we must live them. Now, within living memory of many of you in this room, the Cold War positioned defenders of democracy against much more tyrannical forces on this continent. And consider the side in that fight that censored dissidents, that closed churches, that canceled elections. Were they the good guys? Certainly not. And thank God they lost the Cold War. They lost because they neither valued nor respected all of the extraordinary blessings of liberty. The freedom to surprise, to make mistakes, to invent, to build. As it turns out...
Ironically, the current state of the United States is closer to its enemies during the Cold War than the Allied side during the Cold War right now. Like, the positions of authoritarianism that are being taken are closer to the Soviets than they are to, like, Ronald Reagan-era Republicans, you know? So, it's just kind of ironic that he's bringing that up, but okay.
You can't mandate innovation or creativity, just as you can't force people what to think, what to feel, or what to believe, and we believe those things are certainly connected.
Isn't this like the same administration that just like canceled the ability for you to choose your gender? Like, didn't they just sign an executive order that there's only like two genders allowed, like the one that you're born with? Like, what, bro? What? uh, okay.
And unfortunately, when I look at Europe today, it's sometimes not so clear what happened to some of the Cold War's winners. I look to Brussels, where EU commissars warn citizens that they intend to shut down social media during times of civil unrest the moment they spot what they've judged to be, quote, hateful content. Or to this very country, where police have carried out raids against citizens.
Unironically, being canceled for being a far right Nazi is okay. I think that you should not be allowed to be a Nazi. So I don't actually have any problems with that. And I don't think any reasonable person would too. Like, I mean, if you ever find yourself on the position of going, oh, I should just let people be Nazis. Like, just take a step back. You don't have to. You don't have to let them be Nazis. You could say no. You could be like, no, your opinion is not allowed. You can't actually be a fascist. Uh, like you're allowed to be intolerant of the intolerant.
Citizens suspected of posting anti-feminist comments online as part of, quote, combating misogyny on the internet, a day of action. I look to Sweden, where 2 weeks ago the government convicted a Christian activist for participating in Koran burnings that resulted in his friend's murder. And as the judge in his case chillingly noted, Sweden's laws to supposedly protect free expression do not, in fact, grant, and I'm quoting, a free pass to do or say anything without risking offending the group that holds that belief.
Yeah. If you do something to piss somebody off enough to make them violent, if you do something like egregious to a person or a group of people, and you run the risk of them retaliating, potentially sometimes violently even, right? Like, that you still have the freedom to say and do whatever you want, though. But like, FAFO, right? FAFO, as the kids say. If you're going to do something that's egregious and you know it has potential risk with it, that bad things might happen. But you are free to say and do whatever you want. But I agree, like, there shouldn't be like violent consequences of that. You should have like a state to protect you from that and to protect your speech necessarily from violence. But the state can only go so far, right? And I don't know particularly that much about like Sweden and how much protection they have in terms of the state and their freedom of speech. Like, that's like an American thing that we care about here. I don't particularly care what Europeans think when it comes to freedom of speech. So,
and perhaps most concerningly, I look to our very dear friends, the United Kingdom, where the backslide away from conscience rights has placed the basic liberties of religious Britons in particular in the crosshairs. A little over 2 years ago, the British government charged Adam Smith Connor, a 51-year-old physiotherapist and an Army veteran, with the heinous crime of standing 50 meters from an abortion clinic and silently praying for 3 minutes.
I can almost guarantee you he's taking that out of context. Like, I'm not even going to look that up, but I can just default assume that it's bullshit, because most of the time whenever they come up with these like analogies to shit, if you dig into it, it's always like the most crazy shit that actually happened. And this is not going to be any exception here, okay?
Not obstructing anyone, not interacting with anyone, just silently praying on his own. And after British law enforcement spotted him and demanded to know what he was praying for.
Okay, I'm just, you know what? Screw it. We're gonna fact check him in real time, just for the fun of it.
And after British law enforcement spotted him and demanded minutes, not obstructing anyone, not interacting with anyone, from an abortion clinic, and go. The British government charged Adam Smith Connor.
Adam Smith Connor. praying man breached abortion clinic. Okay, so he breached the safe zone. So it's not like he was just standing somewhere minding his own business. There was a safe zone, and he breached it. Okay, that's it. Like, obviously, you failed to mention that, right? A physiotherapist who prayed outside an abortion center has been convicted of breaching a safe zone after refusing requests to move on. So he was asked to leave, and he didn't. Adam Smith Connor was outside the clinic in Bournemouth, I don't know, British, in November 2022, where the public space protection order was in place. 51-year-old from Southampton denied failing to comply with the order, but District Judge Orla Austin said on Wednesday his actions had been deliberate. It sounds like they were. Smith Connor was handed a 2-year conditional discharge in order to pay more than $9,000 in costs. People Magistrate Courts heard the former serviceman had his head bowed and hands clasped outside the British Pregnancy Advisory Service on Offer Road. The court was told he'd been praying for his unborn son, who he said had died from abortion 22 years ago. The safe zone, introduced in October 2022, bans activity in favor or against abortion services, including protests, harassments, and vigil. Okay, so it's like a thing in Britain. Like, they just know you're not supposed to do that. So he was told not to do that. He was asked to leave, and he refused. So, yeah, he got charged for trespassing.
51-year-old physiotherapist and an Army veteran with the heinous crime of standing 50 meters from an abortion
Trespassing after he was asked to leave. Again, we just checked this. He was charged with trespassing after he was asked to leave.
Clinic and silently praying for 3 minutes. Not obstructing anyone, not interacting with anyone, just silent.
No, he interacted with people. People told him to leave. He was told to leave, and he refused. Therefore, he was obstructing.
Praying on his own. And after British law enforcement spotted him and demanded to know what he was praying for, Adam replied simply, it was on behalf.
By the way, this is a security meeting, right? Like, this is a meeting, like, there's a country being invaded by Russia right now, and you're talking about some British dude that was charged with trespassing because he wanted to pray outside an abortion clinic when he was told specifically not to. What? Like, what are we doing here? This is not anywhere near related to... Like, this is a room full of generals, of European generals. This is not... nobody gives a shit about this right now in this room. Like, what he's talking about is not landing with anybody because it has nothing to do with why they're there.
Of the unborn son he and his former girlfriend had aborted years before. Now, the officers were not moved. Adam was found guilty of breaking the government's new buffer zones law, which criminalizes silent prayer and other actions that could influence a person's decision.
For or against. We just read the article. Like, you're not allowed to have vigils. You're not allowed to do anything. There's a buffer zone, so just get the fuck out of there, right? Like, just leave. Don't bother people. Stop bothering people. That's what it is. It's just don't bother people zone, and that's fine. That's fine. There's sometimes you shouldn't harass people. Like, it's, again, I don't see why you need the protection to harass people, but okay.
Within 200 meters of an abortion facility. He was sentenced to pay thousands of pounds in legal costs to the prosecution. Now, I wish I could say that this was a fluke, a one-off crazy example of a badly written law being enacted against a single person. But no, this last
No, a fluke would be a parasitic worm.
October, just a few months ago, the Scottish government began distributing letters to citizens whose houses lay within so-called safe access zones, warning them that even private prayer within their own homes may amount to breaking the law.
I'm not even going to look that one up. That is just complete bullshit. There is just no way that's true. Like, there are some times you can just, when somebody says something, you, as a rational, reasonable person, you should be able to just say, that's bullshit. Man, I'm not going to look further into that. And this is one of those instances. I just don't believe that's what happened or how that happened. And neither should you. As an objective person based in reality, you should have heard that and went, nah, that's dumb, and then moved on.
Naturally, the government urged readers to report any fellow citizens suspected guilty of thought crime. In Britain,
Again, like, right, okay, all right.
and across Europe, free speech, I fear, is in retreat.
Bro, it's Europe. I don't think they have free speech like we do in America. I'm pretty sure they have like some weird European bullshit. I don't care. It's Europe. I don't care what they have on their speech regulation, if I'm being honest.
And in the interest of
And neither should you at the Munich Security Conference. Because that's not what this conference is about.
comedy, my friends, but also in the interest of truth, I will admit that sometimes the loudest voices for censorship have come not from within Europe, but from within my own country, where the prior administration threatened and bullied social media companies to censor so-called misinformation.
Like, there is a need for censorship of just outright bullshit. Like, if you just have outright bullshit constantly flooding the airwaves, like, people start believing just objectively false realities. Like, it should not be legal to spread, willfully spread misinformation with the intent of, like, lying to the public. And that's, a lot of that happened, and is still happening. Like, and it's probably going to happen even more now that we have our dear leader, the sentient Cheeto.
Misinformation like, for example, the idea that coronavirus had likely leaked from a laboratory in China. Our own government encouraged private companies to silence people.
Okay, so we're blaming China now for because that hasn't been debunked. Again, like, these are things that have been debunked. Like, you have theories, like conspiracy theories like that, and it's not good that the Vice President of the United States is just, like, talking about wild conspiracy theories about the COVID outbreak during the Munich Security Conference. It's wild how we got here, man.
People who dared to utter what turned out to be an obvious truth. So I come here today not just with an observation, but with...
By the way, China right now, Xi Jinping did nothing and won. We are fucking our economy so bad right now. What do? They released that AI chatbot, and they just, like, crashed our economy by, like, $3 trillion or like $1 trillion. That just completely destroyed our AI market. Then yeah, I feel like, and we're not really competing with them at the same time. Like, we're tariffing Canada and Mexico, like, but I don't hear any like rallying cries against China right now, because I don't know. It's kind of weird. It's kind of in a weird place. I'm interested to see how much further that goes, but we'll see. I don't think he's gonna. I don't think he's even gonna rally against China here. I think he just dropped that one just because of, COVID, and then he's gonna move away from it really quickly. It'd be interesting if we start seeing, like, the old anti-China Trump.
An offer. And just as the Biden administration seemed desperate to silence people for speaking their minds, so the Trump administration will do precisely the opposite, and I hope that we can work together on that. In Washington, there is a new sheriff in town, and under Donald Trump's leadership, we may disagree with your views, but we will fight to defend your right to offer it in the public square, agree or disagree.
We'll see about that. Like legitimately, we will see about that. Because didn't he, the birthright citizenship, didn't he sign an executive order to try and get rid of that, which is like a constitutional amendment? Like, you can't get rid of that. So he's trying to, so who's to say that, like, the freedom of speech isn't next, right? Like, it got blocked by the courts, Like, thank God, like we have a system of checks and balances in this country, which is obviously still functioning. Um, we have a Republican-controlled House and Senate, so like they're probably gonna get a lot of shit passed, but at least they can't just completely override the Constitution. So far.
Now, we're at the point, of course, that the situation has gotten so bad that this December, Romania straight up canceled the results of a presidential election based on the flimsy.
Yeah, we were looking at that article about like the Russian interference being the reason that they canceled that. I'm gonna go ahead and assume that the candidate was like very pro-Russia, which is very likely if he was being supported by Russian funding.
Suspicions of an intelligence agency and enormous pressure from its continental neighbors. Now, as I understand it, the argument was that Russian disinformation had infected the Romanian elections. But I'd ask my European friends to have some perspective. You can believe it's wrong for Russia to buy social media advertisements to influence your elections. We certainly do. You can condemn it on the world stage even. But if your democracy can be destroyed with a few $100,000.
Okay, so why condemn it and then just be like, you shouldn't do that, but oh well, you did, so I guess you win. I feel like you lost your train of thought there, or you lost your logical train there, because if you condemn it and you're like, no, this is a bad thing, we shouldn't allow this thing, but yeah, just let it go, let it happen. That's not the logical conclusion that I would have come up with that the reasoning running up to, yeah, just let it happen.
Dollars of digital advertising from a foreign country, then it wasn't very strong to begin with. Now,
just like the three people from AFD clapping.
The good news is that I happen to think your democracies are substantially less brittle than many people apparently fear. And I really do believe that allowing our citizens to speak their mind will make them stronger still. Which, of course, brings us back to Munich, where the organizers of this very conference have banned lawmakers representing populist parties on both the left and the right from participating in these conversations. Now, again, we don't have to agree with everything or anything that people say. But when when political leaders represent an important constituency, it is incumbent upon us to at least participate in dialogue with them. Now, to many of us on the other side of the Atlantic, it looks more and more like old and
I just have to jump in here again and say this is a security conference, and we are almost done. We are halfway through. We should have heard way more about the Russia-Ukraine situation, I feel like, from JD Vance, as the representative of our government to the European nations at a security conference. I feel like that should have been the only talking point, right? Because that was Trump's big platform, that he's going to end the Ukraine war on day one, right? He's going to end the lower grocery prices on day one and end the Ukraine war, right? So I don't see that happening. Well, I mean, Trump's meeting with Putin and the Kremlin right now, or not right now, but they're going to in Saudi Arabia. But that's that's Russia. He's meeting with the aggressor. He's not meeting with the aggressor and Zelensky, right? So we'll see how that goes.
Entrenched interests hiding behind ugly Soviet-era words like misinformation and disinformation, who simply don't.
Soviet-era word. I don't think those were really popular phrases back then. I feel like propaganda was, but misinformation, disinformation, that's relatively new.
Don't like the idea that somebody with an alternative viewpoint might express a different opinion or, God forbid, vote a different way or, even worse, win an election. Now, this is a security conference.
Yeah, because historically you won by 1.8% of the popular vote, right, overall, or almost 2% of the popular vote. So you have the mandate of heaven That's who you're speaking for.
Conference. And I'm sure you all came here prepared to talk about how exactly you intend to increase defense spending over the next few years in line with some new target. And that's great, because as President Trump has made abundantly clear, he believes that our European friends must play a bigger role in the future of this continent. We don't think.
So basically, screw Europe. So we're pulling out. We're basically that's what the vibe I'm getting from this is. You guys are on your own. We're not helping you, because he's not actually talking about the security of Europe or anything that like the generals, the European generals would actually care about. So that's, I guess, end of American hegemony. I mean, I guess that's a potentially a good thing. I don't know if that's going to be immediately a good thing for European nations, especially the ones in Eastern Europe, bordering Russia. I feel like those are going to be the ones that are going to suffer the most from that.
You hear this term, burden sharing, but we think it's an important part of being in a shared alliance together that the Europeans step up while America focuses on areas of the world that are in great danger.
Like what areas? Because Americans famously don't want us to be anywhere. Like most Americans don't want us to be anywhere. Where do you supposedly want to send Americans? Like the Middle East? Like do you want to send more troops to the Middle East? Because we just got out of there, right? Like, and nobody wants to go back. Like that's not a popular talking point, bro.
But let me also ask you, how will you even begin to think through the kinds of budgeting questions if we don't know what it is that we're defending in the first place? I've heard a lot already in my conversations, and I've had many, many great conversations with many people gathered here in this room. I've heard a lot about what you need to defend yourselves from, and of course that's important. But what has seemed a little bit less clear to me, and certainly I think to many of the citizens of Europe, is what exactly it is that you're defending yourselves for. What is the positive vision that animates this shared security compact that we all believe is so important?
Bro, I don't know what is going on with the flickering or if it'll even show back up on the screen. But, see, now it went away. Nope, that's back. We'll see if we can change that in editing.
And I believe deeply that there is no security if you are afraid of the voices, the opinions, and the conscience that guide your very own people. Europe faces many challenges, but the crisis this continent faces right now, the crisis I believe we all face together, is one of our own making.
I feel like the crisis is the Russian troops in Ukraine at the Munich Security Conference. I think that's the crisis everybody's got, top of mind. Not what you're talking about.
If you're running in fear of your own voters, there is nothing America can do for you.
Also, Romania, I'm sorry, of the countries that Americans care about the most, Romania is not up there. Right, and well, I guess you're talking to a European security conference. It's hard to tell because you're just doing American talking points, right? So for Americans watching this, it's like, Romania? Like, why would I give a shit what Romania is doing? Like, we don't give a shit what Romania is doing, right? As long as they're not like causing war, like if they're not invading their neighbors, like we generally don't care. Like one of the least consequential countries to Americans. And the reason I say that is because these are American talking. We're talking about American shit. Like, Europeans don't give a shit about anything that he's been talking about so far. Well, I guess Romanians care about the Romanian elections. Like, I feel like he might be hitting home for some Romanian patriots right there.
Nor, for that matter, is there anything that you can do for the American people who elected me and elected President Trump. You need democratic mandates to accomplish anything of value in the coming years. Have we learned nothing that thin mandates...
Bro, you won by like less than 2%, okay? Like, your mandate is very thin, and it's going down really rapidly. Like, people are not happy with planes are falling out of the sky, dog. Like, people are not happy with that.
produce unstable results, but there is so much of value that can be accomplished with the kind of democratic mandate that I think will come from being more responsive to the voices of your citizens. If you're going to enjoy...
Which, by the way, responsive to the voices of the citizens, as soon as the planes started crashing, they fired more FAA employees. So, like, I mean, it's a response in the opposite direction of what everybody wanted, but it is a response. So, I mean, fair point.
Competitive economies, if you're going to enjoy affordable energy and secure supply chains, then you need mandates to govern, because you have to make difficult choices to enjoy all of these things. And of course, we know that very well in America.
Yeah, like, austerity doesn't really work, and he's just pushing austerity right now. And that's, whew, it's going to suck here in the States with all the austerity measures that they're taking. But you're talking to a European audience of European generals at a security conference that's probably not what any of them care about or want to talk about or want to hear about. Like, so, you know, J.D. Vance rizzing up Europe.
You cannot win a democratic mandate by censoring your opponents or putting them in jail, whether that's the leader of the opposition, a humble Christian praying in her own home, or a journalist trying to report the news. Nor can you win one by disregarding your basic electorate on questions like who gets to be a part of our shared society. And of all the pressing challenges that the nations represented here face, I believe there is nothing more urgent than mass migration.
Bro, this is not America. Like, again, your talking points, these are American talking points. Like, I don't think Europeans have the same type of, like, instant, like, rabid dog whistle from hearing that there's migrants coming, right? I don't think that, for the most part, I don't believe Europeans give a shit about migration as much as Americans do, or at least right-wing Americans do, right? Like, pretty far right-wing Americans. I don't believe that's, like, the same over there. These are not points that are hitting home. Like, maybe AFD, like, you're talking to, like, some far right extreme groups in Europe potentially, but, like, Europeans, they have, like, multiple party systems. They don't have, like, the two-party system that we have. So, like, all the shit that he's saying is, like, geared towards an American audience of, like, a two-part, like, you're locked into the two-part. They don't have that. Yeah, this is just kind of a bizarre thing. Like, you'd think that he would have prepared for, like, I don't know, talking to, like, a European delegation about a security conference, but this is just, culture war shit. American culture war shit.
Today, almost 1 in 5 people living in this country moved here from abroad. That is, of course, an all-time high. It's a similar number, by the way, in the United States, also an all-time high. The number of immigrants who entered the EU from non-EU countries doubled between 2021 and 2022 alone.
Just want to point out that there was an invasion. Okay, he said 2021 to 2022. I was going to say non-EU countries, that's going to include Ukrainian refugees, right? Because they're all migrating out of Ukraine during the conflict. But he said 2021 to 2022. I don't... Has the conflict really been going on since 2022? I thought it was only like a year and a half now, but okay.
And of course, it's gotten much higher since. And we know the situation, it didn't materialize in a vacuum. It's the result of a series of conscious decisions made by politicians all over the continent and others across the world over the span of a decade. We saw the horrors wrought by these decisions yesterday in this very city. And of course, I can't bring it up again without thinking about the terrible victims who had a beautiful winter day in Munich ruined. Our thoughts and prayers are with them and will remain with them. But why did this happen in the first place? It's a terrible story, but it's one we've heard way too many times in Europe and unfortunately too many times in the United States as well.
Again, it's like, yeah, it's a shitty thing that happened, but it's anecdotal, as and it's not it's not a statistical thing that's happening in large mass because of migrants. Like, a lot of crime happens across the board. If you look at, again, because he's using American talking points, I'll use American statistics. Across the board, migrants, especially ones that are not here legally, the ones that are undocumented migrants, they commit less crime than native-born Americans in the United States, right? And I would have to just say that it's potentially like the same everywhere else. I don't know. I'm not gonna look up and look into like European shit and see what the hell their countries are up to. I don't give a shit about Europe, but that's one thing that I can probably agree with across the board with right wing and left wing in the United States is we don't actually care about Europe. But let's see.
An asylum seeker, often a young man in his mid-20s, already known to police, rams a car into a crowd and shatters a community. How many times must we suffer these appalling setbacks before we change course and take our shared civilization in a new direction? No voter on this continent went to the ballot box to open the floodgates to millions of unvetted immigrants. But you know what they did vote for? In England, they voted for Brexit, and agree or disagree, they voted for it. And more all over Europe, they're voting for
I don't think that Europe has unvetted immigrants. I feel like that's just not possible. Because, like, you're surrounded by other European countries. The only way you're getting there is, like, by boat, right? Or, like, I guess if people march, like, if they literally hike their asses up through Turkey, right? Which, to get to other EU nations, like, I guess you could. I mean, if Turkey has a lot of refugees, you could say that, right? But I feel like it's just not like us, like, geographically possible to have unvetted mass migration into Europe. That's just like they have to, like, if you're coming in by boat, like, what are you doing? You parking the boat like in the dead of night and then just like, whew, like that's not happening. I fail to see that as a course of reality.
Political leaders who promise to put an end to out-of-control migration. Now, I happen to agree with a lot of these concerns, but you don't have to agree with me. I just think that people care about their homes, they care about their dreams, they care about their safety and their capacity to provide for themselves and their children. And they're smart. I think this is one of the most important things I've learned in my brief time in politics. Contrary to what you might hear a couple mountains over in Davos, the citizens of all of our nations don't generally think of themselves as educated animals or as interchangeable cogs of a global economy. And it's hardly surprising that they don't want to be shuffled about or relentlessly ignored by their leaders. And it is the business of democracy.
I mean, fair point. People don't want to be ignored by their leaders, but, like, again, the policies that have been enacted in the first couple weeks here in the United States are, like, expressly ignoring the needs of the American people, and like legitimately. So, like, you can say that, but, like, your policies are the exact opposite of that. Like, how much are they cutting to Medicaid and Social Security? Like, what's the plan? Like, I saw that earlier, that they're going to be cutting, like, some amount of millions to Medicaid and Social Security. Like, people don't want that, but you guys are implementing that policy. So, yeah, I mean, okay. I mean, you got to realize it's all bullshit. It's like, if it's coming from the Trump administration, you already know it's all bullshit. But it's surprising to hear some things when they're actively doing the opposite.
To adjudicate these big questions at the ballot box. I believe that dismissing people, dismissing their concerns, or worse yet, shutting down media, shutting down elections, or shutting people out of the political process
It really looks like he's killing it with this audience. It does not look like anybody's on board with his little speech.
protects nothing. In fact, it is the most surefire way to destroy democracy. And speaking up and expressing opinions isn't election interference. Even when people express views outside your own country, and even when those people are very influential. And trust me, I say this with all humor, if American democracy can survive 10 years of Greta Thunberg scolding, you guys can survive a few months of Elon Musk.
Right, because you can compare an activist who literally is, not, like doesn't have that much influence, power, and wealth, to like a billionaire who owns one of the largest multimedia companies, right? Like those are comparable things. They're not. That's not a comparable thing at all. A few months of Elon Musk, and why are you telling at the Munich security conference? You're basically telling them, "Hey, prepare. Elon Musk is coming. You're gonna have to prepare for a couple months of the of Elon's onslaught." Like, that's kind of ominous.
But what no democracy, American, German, or European, will survive is telling millions of voters that their thoughts and concerns, their aspirations, their pleas for relief are invalid or unworthy of even being considered. Democracy rests on the sacred principle that the voice of the people matters. There's no room for firewalls. You either uphold the principle or you don't. Europeans, the people, have a voice. European leaders have a choice. And my strong belief is that we do not need to be afraid of the future. You can embrace what your people tell you, even when it's surprising, even when you don't agree.
That is seriously annoying me. Why does it keep flickering like that?
And if you do so, you can face the future with certainty and with confidence, knowing that the nation stands behind each of you. And that to me is the great magic of democracy. It's not in these stone buildings or beautiful hotels. It's not even in the great institutions that we have built together as a shared society. To believe in democracy is to understand that each of our citizens has wisdom and has a voice. And if we refuse to listen to that voice, even our most successful fights will secure very little. As Pope John Paul II, in my view, one of the most extraordinary
Get a fucking quote, Pope John Paul.
Champions of democracy on this continent or any other once said, "Do not be afraid." We shouldn't be afraid of our people, even when they express views that disagree with their leadership.
Isn't the Pope like shitting on him like right now? Isn't that like a thing that's happening? Isn't the Pope calling out JD Vance at the current Pope? That's great.
Thank you all. Good luck to all of you. God bless you.
Okay, so that was an interesting security conference. Not a lot of security was talked about. A lot of rhetoric, a lot of American talking points. Shit. Okay. I guess that's what we're doing. We're just embarrassing ourselves. The 100 years of or 1,000 years of humiliation has started on the U.S. continent. This is gonna be an interesting several years here. All right. Well, that was it. Goodbye.